Red lights. Okay. So I'd like to introduce Professor Shaolei Ren, who is an associate professor of electrical and computer engineering at UC Riverside. His work primarily focuses on socially and environmentally responsible computing, in particular focusing on AI. Recently, his work has been wildly successful in terms of news outlets and stuff. I think more than 1,000 news articles in the last couple of years in 100 different countries. So if you've heard anything about water and AI, that's this guy. So he'll be presenting the unpaid toll, quantifying and minimizing the public health impact of AI. Please join me in welcoming Professor Ren.
And the invitation is my great honor to be presenting some of my previous and also recent research on the environmental consequences of AI. So let me start with the very sort of a cliche. AI is booming. We have seen AI is used for playing games. ChatGPT offers very popular online services. The rise of the AI actually comes with increasingly larger and larger model sizes. So the GPT-3 used to have like 175 billion parameters, but Llama 3.1 has more than 400 billion parameters, and GPT-4 is commonly believed to have 1.8 trillion parameters. So these huge model sizes means we can't really run them directly on cell phones. We just have to house them in the data centers. And this growing size of data centers and models, AI models are also driving up the energy consumption at a crazy speed. So if you look at the DOE projection released last month, from 2024 up to 2028, so just in these 4 years, we're gonna tripling the energy consumption by US data centers. And this doesn't include Bitcoin mining. And this increase is almost entirely driven by AI computing. And in 2028, this US data center energy will be consuming up to 12% of the electricity consumption in the US. And in some states like Virginia, they could be consuming more than 40% of the state's electricity consumption. So that really places a huge amount of pressure on the power grid system and on the environment. So let me give you some sense of how much energy this AI computing consumes. So this is just for training one large number, Llama 3.1, with a parameter of size, with a number of, with 405 billion. So training this model once consumes amount of energy that is equivalent to more than 25,000 homes annual electricity consumption in the US. And to run some inferences, that depends on the size of the model and also depends on the length of the queries. But in general, if you use like a GPT-4o or Llama 8 billion parameter model, so those are like a smaller language models. They write a short email about 100 to 200 words, is consuming this much energy. But if you go for a larger model, there's going to be the energy consumption increases dramatically. And how much this energy means? This 280 watt-hour energy for writing an email using GPT-4 is equivalent to turning on the light bulb, LED bulb for like 31 hours. And if you just write write one email, that's enough to drive a Tesla Model 3 for more than 1 mile. And this is just the energy consumption for writing one single email using GPT-4. It's a lot. I think so. So there's a cost of energy, right? So this is not really trying to make AI look bad. Actually, we're trying to have a more comprehensive cost-benefit analysis to make more informed decisions. So let's try to sort of quantify the cost of this energy use. Of course, you're going to have to pay for the electricity bill. That's the price you're paying directly. But on top of that, there are also environmental costs, like the carbon emission. And the carbon emission in general is classified into 3 different scopes. We have scope 1, which is the direct carbon emission. For data center, there's very little direct carbon emission. But for scope 2, that's the electricity consumption. Due to the high energy demand, there's a high amount of carbon emission as well. And scope 3 is for the supply chain. So essentially, when you buy the hardware, when you recycle the hardware, there's going to be some carbon emission as well. And for tech companies, most of the carbon emission is coming from the supply chain. after they apply some renewable energy credits to offset their scope 2. So to illustrate this carbon emission problem, people often show this type of picture, like, we have these black things coming from the towers, but is it really carbon emission? Carbon, from the high school chemistry, we know that carbon is invisible, doesn't have color. So this is not really carbon. Actually, what you're seeing in the black part, this is mostly water vapor. Yes, AI has a water footprint as well. So how does AI use water? Not only for electricity, but also for cooling down the data center facility and generating electricity, and also finally for making the AI chips. So these are what we call 3 different scopes of water consumption, similar to how we classify the greenhouse gas scoping definition. So look at the scope 1, direct water consumption. The server energy, huge amount of energy will be converted into heat, and we have to get rid of the heat to prevent server overheating. And this involves 2 stages. The first stage is to move the heat from the server to a heat exchanger. This is called server level cooling. And the second stage is to move the heat from the heat exchanger to the actual outside environment. The first stage, for server level cooling, you either use air cooling or liquid-based cooling. There's no water loss or water consumption or water evaporation. But when you talk about the facility level cooling, most commonly, those large technology companies like Google, Meta, Microsoft, they all use water evaporation to cool down the facilities. And this picture shows Google's data center cooling system. And you can see at the right-hand side, this is a server, and then they move the heat to the heat exchanger. But then they're going to move the heat to the cooling tower, and you can see some water vapor coming up from at the top, and this is the water evaporation. And importantly, over 80% of the water that used for cooling down Google's facilities from potable sources. So this scope 1 water consumption is defined technically as the water withdrawal minus water discharge. So when we take a shower, we withdraw a lot of water, but we're not really consuming it by definition because we discharge around 90% of the water back into the sewage. But for data center, they consume roughly 80% of the water they take from the municipal supplies. And some tech companies can consume more than 20 billion liters of water each year. And that's roughly the same as a major beverage company's water consumption each year. So it's quite substantial. And if you look at the DOE report, although it's called Department of Energy, but they look at the water consumption recently as well. So you can see that from 2023 up to 2028, the water consumption will be doubled or even quadrupled in just a few years. And this is for scope 1 direct water consumption. And also we have scope 2 water consumption. So look at this picture. At the foreground is a data center at the bottom. And here at the top, you see some water vapors coming from the new cooling tower. And this is the nuclear power plant's cooling tower. So they're evaporating water to cool down the power plant and then providing the power to the data center. So this is definitely something that we need to take into account for data centers' water footprint. And actually, DOE report says this is part of the true water cost of data centers. So we have to include that as well. And also, there's a scope 3 water consumption, but there's very limited information. So we just mention it here, but we don't have a concrete idea of how much water is needed for that part. We just know it's a lot. So to characterize this operational water footprint, essentially we need to consider both on-site water and off-site water. And if you use some simple mathematics, you're going to see that essentially that's the energy multiplied by your on-site water usage effectiveness, WUE, plus the energy multiplied by your off-site WUE. So we use some of the water research and the public data to characterize what is the on-site WE and off-site WE for Microsoft data center in the US and also outside and also internationally. So we look at a set of locations. You can see this WE changes depending on the cooling technology, depending on the weather condition, and the offsite WE depends on your fuel mix. If you're using cooling towers for thermal power or nuclear power or solar energy or wind energy, they have different amount of water efficiency as well. So calculate the water consumption, and you can see that in general, to answer like 10 to 50 queries from a large language model, a medium-sized large language model like GPT-3, you're going to consume 500 milliliters water. Again, this water consumption is defined as the water evaporated into the atmosphere. So, and this changes depending on the location. In general, locations with the hotter climates, with more water intensive electricity generation will be consuming more water. So there, the number will be less. So this is the number of responses from LLM to write an email about water. So we also, I mean, having this knowledge, that's of course, that's a great step, but we also want to accelerate this research for other sectors. So we built the first of its kind water efficiency data set. So other sectors like EV charging or other type of cooling system can use our information to drive innovations in their water sustainability. So since our publication, AI's water is being covered by a lot of media, and also recently by those policies like United Nations Digital Economy Report, and they explicitly call for the efforts to address both carbon emission and water consumption of AI computing systems. And also we've seen this government guidelines and international organization recommendations on AI computing. So if you look at how the industry is working to address this issue, they look at the carbon emission. This is the Amazon Web Service dashboard. So they show you the carbon emission, which is great. But what is missing here is the water usage effectiveness. And we are calling to change this dashboard by adding the water. So we've seen some legislative efforts at the federal level and also in the state of California. So I'm working with the Assemblyman's office and our legislator's office to sort of draft some bills to sort of change this behavior, so that we're going to see water as along with the carbon in the AWS dashboard in the future. So before concluding the water part, I'm going to just mention that water has 3 different colors. Green water, that's the water contained in the soil and used by the plants. For example, you've heard that producing 1 kilogram of grass-fed beef requires like 15,000 liters of water, but most of the water is the water in the soil to grow the grasses to feed the cattle. So essentially, in some sense, this is the supply chain water for the beef. And also, water has blue water. Blue water is the water that humans can use from the rivers, from lakes, from the groundwater sources. And data centers use blue water. So it's not really the right comparison to say, oh, you use blue water versus this green water. And also in our calculation, we don't really consider the supply chain water. So it's basically not the right type of a comparison when we say, oh, 1 kilogram of beef will be able to give you that many number of ChatGPT responses. So just to quickly recap, with the cost of energy has the electricity real cost, has the environmental consequences in terms of carbon emission, has the water impact, because although water goes into the global water cycle, it's going to be creating some competition, and also water distribution is heavily uneven across the world. And in California, we evaporate the water, but we don't know when it will be coming back. In the next few months, it just depends. And so far this year, we don't have a rain season at all. But are they all? Well, this is not the end. So there's one more thing, because if you look at the carbon emission, water consumption, they have some impacts on the people, but not really directly. They have some second order or third order impacts. Let's say the carbon emission has this long-term impact on the climate change, which will be affecting everyone in the planet. But that's through, it's a long-term process. And something that is affecting people right now, immediately and tangibly, is the air pollutants coming from the backup generators and also fossil fuels. This will be affecting people's health, which I'm going to be talking about next. So this criteria air pollutants includes particulate matter 2.5. Those are the fine particles that can penetrate into people's lungs, and also sulfur dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, VOC. Those are the secondary PM 2.5, precursor PM 2.5, they can form secondary PM 2.5 and then have this health problems. So for data centers, there are three different ways, or for AI computing, there are generally three different ways to emit these air pollutants. Scope one, that's through the backup generator. Even though data centers don't really operate backup generator very frequently, they need some regular maintenance. And these maintenance hours actually generate a huge amount of nitrogen dioxide. And also scope two, that's through the fossil fuels. And scope three, the supply chain. So we did some study for the supply chain, but due to the lack of data available, so we didn't really go into details for the scope three. So we mainly focus on scope one, scope two. So the public health the impact of these air pollutants have been very well documented in the last few years, not last few decades. So WHO, the U.S. State Department of State, and PBS and science studies. So they all point out the causality relationship between these air pollutants and people's health. So the health outcomes include asthma, lung cancer, cardiovascular diseases, hospitalizations, and even premature deaths. So some quick facts about the air pollution issue in the U.S. So the EPA sets the standards for the national air quality standard through the this is the time to pick up my daughter. So the EPA sets the standard, and even though we have pretty strict quality standard compared to many other countries, but still the fossil fuel is a leading cause of air pollutants, and actually the largest stationary source of nitrogen dioxide emission. And this long-term exposure to PM 2.5, even though below the US standard, is harmful to people's health. And actually, if you look at the WHO's recommended guideline, they recommend 5 micrograms per cubic meters. But the US standard, even though it has been recently tightened, is still 9 micrograms per cubic meters. And based on the most recent years of data available, 2019, about 100,000 people died due to the air pollutant in the US. And this is already a country with a relatively better air quality than many other countries. So importantly, these air pollutants are not limited to a small radius of local communities. If you look at the backup generators or the fossil fuel power plants, they actually travel hundreds of miles across the state lines. So last year, the Canadian wildfire, smokes come from that fire even reached the parts of Texas and England. So this year, the LA wildfire, technically is going to be affecting people in Manhattan. So you might be wondering, well, if you sort of address this carbon emission, are we able to address the air pollution issue as well? They are relevant, they are related, but they are not the same. So we did some study for the US region-wise health price versus the carbon intensity. So this picture basically shows that if you have this, how does this health price change versus the carbon intensity for each unit of electricity consumption? So the first figure shows the interquartile range. Essentially, that's the spreadness of the distribution of the carbon versus health. You can see that the health varies more widely than carbon. The second figure in the middle shows the standard deviation. It gives us a similar conclusion. So why this is the case? Because carbon emission it has a similar impact on the climate change, regardless of where they're emitted. But the health impact heavily depends on the wind direction, depends on the local, depends on the population density. So in general, the prevailing wind speed in the US is from the west to the east. And the eastern parts generally have more fossil fuel as well, and they have a higher population density. So if you have, say, the same amount of air pollution in California versus in Manhattan, then Manhattan is going to have a huge, a much higher impact in terms of the health. So that's why you see these very different signals between the health and the carbon emission, although they have relevant or similar sources. The last figure shows the spatial distribution. You can see higher carbon doesn't necessarily imply higher health costs, or vice versa. So all these things point to the need of us treating public health impact separately from the carbon emission as a different metric and different signal to consider. So we show some of the studies from US EPA tools to analyze what is the public health burden due to the backup generators in Virginia. So you can see these yellow dots, those are the locations of data centers in Virginia. But these air pollutants are not affecting Virginia only. They are actually traveling to New York. They're also affecting people in Florida. So the most affected county is not in Virginia, technically. It's actually in Montgomery County in Maryland. So because that county is not too far away from Virginia, and also it has more population, and also the wind direction just somehow blowing through that direction. So this is the result that highlights that we need to look beyond your backyard when we look at the air pollution issues. And also we did quantify the health impact from 2019 to 2023 in the US by data centers. And the general conclusion is that overall, we're seeing a rapid increase, double-digit increase of air pollutant public health impact coming from data centers. And this could be more than 40% of the on-road emissions in California with about 35 million vehicles. So it's really a substantial amount. And if you look at the details, so in general, as I said, the eastern parts, they have more population, in higher population density. And also the wind is blowing from the west to the east. So the eastern parts are suffering more in terms of the public health burden per household wise. And if you look at the top 10 counties that are most affected, all of them have a lower income ratio compared to the national average in terms of the median house count. And also overall, 20% of the Americans took about 50% of the cost for the public health impact. So I think this is something that we definitely need to address in an urgent manner. And let's look at some predictions based on the DOE data and also US EPA projection. So in 2030, or actually 2028, so this US data center primarily driven by AI computing, the public health impact will be even exceeding California's 35 million vehicles on the road. So this is the problem. And how can we address this issue? So the first thing we are trying to look at is we should look at the data center's own health impact first before addressing other sectors. So this is what we call health-informed and sustainable AI. And the idea is very simple. Although the data centers are creating this problem, but they also have a lot of flexibilities. So their workloads can be processed in different locations, which have different impacts in terms of the public health burden. So if you look at the current work we have been seeing from Google, from Microsoft, they're leveraging this workload flexibility to route the computation to places with a lower carbon intensity, with lower electricity price. They can reduce the energy bill, and they also reduce the carbon emission. And this sort of flexibility can also be leveraged to exploit the public health diversity, heterogeneity, to reduce the overall health impact, and without affecting the carbon emission. So the idea we are trying to do here is that due to the time-varying demand, so we can use the dynamic server provision. Because if you look at the data centers, their servers are currently almost all turned on without shutting down. But the user demand is changing over time. So let's say at a certain time, we have this many user demand. These are the active servers. In the next time, we're going to have fewer demand, fewer users coming in due to the hourly changes or some break news or whatever factor that drive the change in the demand. Then you can potentially shut down one of the servers. And next, maybe there will be more requests coming in again. Then we need to turn on another server. So, this sort of frequent switching on and off is prohibiting those data center operators from dynamically provision their servers. So this is the crucial point that we have to address before we can reduce the energy demand, reduce the carbon emission, reduce the health impact. So how can we address this issue? So we come up with some model. I mean, I'll just show you a little bit of math. Obviously, just very minimum. So we have this heating cost. Essentially, that's the operational cost, which includes the performance. You want to make users happy, and also you have the power bills for your operational cost. You have the carbon emission cost and water consumption cost, and plus the health informed cost. That's something that we're adding to the existing literature. And also there's a switching cost because we're toggling the servers back and forth. There's going to be some reconfiguration cost. And we model this as a switching cost. So overall, we try to minimize these two, the summation of these two cost terms. But this is not an easy problem because it's not like the operational cost that only depends on your current decision. Where switching cost naturally has a history, right? Has a memory. When you choose your decision now, it's going to be affecting the next time around of switching cost. If you, let's say, have fewer servers, you need to turn on more servers, there are going to be more setup delay, more switching costs. So this memory term is making the problem a lot more challenging. And in general, in the algorithmic research field, there are two metrics. One is focusing on the worst case, the other one is focusing on the average case. So if you focus on the worst case, then that's more robust. Essentially, we are able to design some what we call expert algorithm, competitive algorithm in the computer science literature terms. And this essentially means whatever the input, I'm going to guarantee that your algorithm performance will be at least this much good compared to the offline case, assuming you know everything. Another performance metric is the average performance. So essentially, if you can develop a reinforcement learning algorithm to look at the history data and then estimate what will be the future trend, and then you make that policy. But if you use this learning-based solution or history-based solution, then the problem is the future might be different from what you have predicted or what you have experienced in the past. So that could lead to some robustness issues for data centers because data centers are mission critical facilities. They don't want to have any type of risk. So we have to address both sides, both robustness and also the after performance. Technically, these are called robustness and consistency. Consistent means we're trying to follow the machine learning, but we don't want to sacrifice the robustness. So this we introduce a sort of a tunable parameter that balances the robustness and the worst case performance, robustness and the consistency. So the algorithm is pretty simple. Essentially, you use the machine learning model to give you a prediction, tell you what you should be doing, but we are not blindly following that action. We actually use the expert algorithm to sort of define a safe region, and you can play within the sandbox and choose the action that is close to your machine learning prediction within the sandbox. So that's the sort of high level idea, which I will skip. We have some theoretical proof. I want to bore you, so I just those are skipped. And the take home message. Yeah, we do also have some empirical results using LLM inference based on the Bloom trace. So the take home message is that our algorithm is able to give you both the best of both worlds. It satisfies the worst case performance guarantees and also give you some average performance improvement over the existing conservative algorithm. So essentially, you can safely dynamically provision your servers without worrying about crashing down your systems. So we are able to reduce the energy cost, reduce the carbon emission, water consumption a little bit, and also some of the health impact. But what about the equity issue? You don't want to really disproportionately hurting certain communities. Just recall from these figures, people in the eastern parts generally suffer more from a health burden due to data center attribution, and also 20% of the American took 50% of the cost. So how can we rebalance this health burden across different regions? If you talk about the other industries, probably they don't have this flexibility, but data centers are more flexible. We can build data centers in Arizona, in Utah, in Oklahoma. We have a variety of choices. And also, even after we build the data center, we can route your workloads. Even though we are in Orange County, we don't have to process the ChatGPT queries in LA. You can move your workloads to Chicago, to New York City for the same amount of service. So this type of flexibility is really unique, but that shouldn't be exploited for benefiting the energy bill only. It should be used to leverage it to balance the health burden across different regions and the water consumption burden across different regions. So actually, people are already not feeling happy about this build out of a data center in their backyard due to the backup generator, due to the water competition. So what do I mean by equity is, let's say we have two different places. Due to their energy fuel mix, due to the wind direction, wind speed, they have different health price for the same amount of computing. Let's say California versus Utah. This is just for illustration. Doesn't mean Utah is always worse than California. Okay, so we don't have to from Utah, right? So if you try to minimize the health cost or total cost, you might want to put all the requests to California, but then you end up with the 3 health costs overall. And if you if you want to be more equitable, actually a better way to split the cost is 2 and 1. So essentially in this way, we have 2 costs in California and 2 costs in Utah. So this is in some sense, you're increasing the total, but you're actually more equitably distributing this cost. So to have this type of effect on your decision making, we are adding a long-term health equity cost, and this cost will be, algorithmically speaking, this actually has a lot of challenges due to the long-term coupling. Because when we make a decision, we don't really know the future. How can we balance the long-term fairness? And we design some algorithm, and the algorithm looks boring, but it's the intuition is that we just set up a dynamic budget. So based on, we give you a budget. If you're not violating the budget, you can do whatever optimization you're doing now. But if you violate the budget, we're going to regularize your decisions so that you can prioritize those decisions that are not violating the budget. But anyway, so we have a dynamic pricing mechanism to achieve this type of effects and to balance the environmental impact for equity. So we also use some Bloom LLM inference trees as example to balance this health and environmental impact across different regions, including the US and also some countries in Europe and Asia. So the take-home message is that we call it equitable geographic load balancing, and this EGLB can really mitigate AI's environmental health equity without really hurting your financial cost. So I think that could be really appealing to some of the data center operators and the tech companies. So at this point, we've been only looking at the AI's negative side. So essentially, there is some huge environmental cost, health cost. We have some initial solution to help address that, but AI can also help us achieve the sustainability and also improve the health impact for other sectors. So this is what we call AI for sustainability and public health. So I'm going to talk about this direction as well. So one of the ways that we are doing is health-informed AI to assess the public health risk. For example, if you go to Google Map and you choose from point A to point B, the carbon, they show you the carbon emission, but they don't show you the air pollution, right? So can we estimate that? And manually estimating that requires, it's just impossible. And even though you rely on some traditional methods, let's say the physics diffusion-based equation modeling, that's still really hard. So, and takes a supercomputer to achieve that. And maybe the benefits of having this information for transportation will be even outweighed by the environmental impact of a supercomputer itself. So we need to use a quick method, and that's where the machine learning can help us achieve this goal. So we are having some research trying to do this, like leveraging this AI prediction to inform users transportation behavior. And they can choose the routes. They can maybe not only choose the carbon efficient way, but also choose the health route among the different options. And although that sounds a nice idea, but unfortunately, there's not much flexibility of transportation. If you want to go from point A to point B, maybe there's just one option or maybe two, that's it. So there's not much flexibility you can leverage to improve the public health. For the energy industry, that's totally different. Energy industry is, so first, it is one of the three big categories of air polluters all over the world, even in the US. So the EPA said, and also energy industry is very unique. So technically, whenever we turn on the light switch, there's going to be a remote power generator responding to our request. So essentially, whatever decision we make now, there's going to be an immediate impact on the emission at the remote site. So if you can look at if you know how much emission will be generated based on your energy behavior, you can actually modulate or change your energy load. Let's say we don't have to charge your EV now. We can charge the EV at a later time because it doesn't really matter, right? So, and if you move your workloads to those hours with the lower carbon emission, with the lower health impact, that's going to be helping everyone else. And that's what we call health-informed energy demand response or demand-side energy management. So as I just said, the power plants are major air polluters even in the US. And one study from Science published in 2023 shows that the US coal power plants contributed to more than 460,000 excess deaths over the 20-year period. Although it has decreased quite substantially, but still it's a major air polluter. And the US EIA projects that even in 2050, 25 years later, the fossil fuels from natural gas will be 80% of the current level. And if the clean energy price doesn't decrease, then this percentage could be even 120%. And in the next few days, we might see a even more aggressive prediction depending on administration decision. And also for coal power plants, 30% of the coal that we're using last year will still be used in 2050. So this fossil fuel, the retirement of this fossil fuel means the power plants is going to be a major air polluter for a long time down the road. Especially if you have some family members with asthma, with vulnerabilities, then it's going to be really affecting them tangibly right now. So, but having these signals are really important because we know the energy price. If you are subscribing to the EV rate, you know that after 9 p.m. in California, it's going to be cheaper. So let's charge our EV at night. So that's a very natural decision. But what about the health? What about the carbon emission? Maybe we know the carbon emission, but what about the health? Do we know the health price? If you charge your EV now, what is the health impact that you are creating in terms of the asthma cases, in terms of the dollar cost? We don't know that. And we're trying to leverage this AI to help us bring the health price to individual users. Because if you don't use AI, you have to rely on traditional physics-informed diffusion model. And that's really time-consuming and resource-intensive. And it's not scalable. So we're using an AI model, which I'll explain later, to predict this health price and inform the health price to change users' behavior. And in this way, you're able to not only minimize your energy bill for your own pocket, but also you're minimizing the health impact across the whole community and across the whole country. So some of the targeted users include these EV users, because they can shift their load temporarily depending on the flexibility. Many people actually, as long as you finish the charging before they go to work, then that should be sufficient for them. And for data center, they have not only spatial, but also not only temporal, but also spatial flexibility. As I explained, we can work across the workloads in this place or in other data centers. And we can train the model, we can suspend the model training in the middle of the process. That's super easy because they are already having these checkpoints in the middle to make sure this training process doesn't get failed if there's some jitters. So these data centers are very flexible, and also HVAC system. You might have this smart thermostat. They promise to save your energy bill. Whether they do it or not, that's a separate story. But they promise to leverage this flexibility to reduce the energy bill. And we can use this flexibility to improve the health impact, reduce the carbon emission, as long as we know the health price. But how do we know the health price? We need to look at the source. Power plant, as I said, that's a major source. And our energy usage decision can affect the source at the emission source at the power plant. So we need to look at what are the power plants generating the electricity at this moment. And this is changing over time. If there's a wind, there's more solar energy. If there's a if there's a sunshine, then there's more solar energy. So this is changing over time. But during the night, we have different type of fuel mixes. So we need to predict what is the future fuel mix. Then we can estimate the emission at each power plant. Look at the location. We know the emission rate overall, and then based on how much they're generating, we know each unit of electricity, what is the emission at the source. But that's not enough, because only knowing the emission source is actually traveling across the state line. They will go through a process called air pollutant dispersion model, the air pollutant dispersion modeling. And this model has been studied for more than 100, literally 100 years, not more, but 100 years. So the first paper on this topic was published in 1925. So many years of research, but if you look at the traditional method, they are really heavily computationally intensive. So we can't really use that method for quick assessment. If you use a reduced model, that's fast, like the US EPA provides the model, but that model has very limited capability. It gives you the long-term impact, but based on the prevailing wind situation, wind condition, but doesn't incorporate the real-time wind and the weather conditions. Doesn't have the level of accuracy that we need to inform users' behavior. So this part, we're using a spatial temporal model to model the air dispersion, air pollutant dispersion. And we use a multi-layer perceptual network, and also based on the graph learning. So this is similar to DeepMind's GraphCast. They are trying to predict the weather for the next few days in a very fast manner. So we're trying to predict the air pollution, where the pollution will be going. So we're using their ideas. They give us the wind speed, but and that will carry the air pollutants. So we're using their similar idea as that, but that will essentially tell you where the pollution will go from the source to the destination all across the country. The next is we need to have a loss function to train the model. We're using this public health informed loss function. Essentially, we have the air pollutant concentration in each location, each county. But what is the health outcome due to the air pollution? And this is, there's a field called public health research on concentration response function. This function can model the health outcomes due to the air pollution concentration. Just like the WHO statistic, they show that more than 4 million people died of outdoor air pollution each year. They're not counting the deaths one by one. Instead, they're using this concentration response function to estimate these deaths for each country. So we use that as well to inform our loss function training. And then we also need to assign the health outcomes like asthma, cardiovascular disease, heart attack, those are health outcomes with some dollar cost. And this is based on health economics. So overall, we have this whole pipeline, and we leverage this end-to-end training to predict the health price, which we call the whole process called HealthWiser. So we have this health price along with the electricity price, and then we have an automated algorithm to make the decisions like the EV charging to minimize the overall cost, including dollar cost for the bill that you're paying directly, including the carbon emission you're generating to the atmosphere, and also the health impact dollar cost converted into the dollar cost. So having this health price will be the very crucial step to make people more engaged, to let people make more informed decisions. So essentially, this is the end of my talk. And to summarize the take-home messages, we have this health-informed AI. we recognize the health impact of AI computing, so that's why we start with mitigating this public health impact of AI computing, but we're not stopping over there. We also try to leverage this AI to help improve the public health, to help to predict the health price for energy usage to make informed decisions. And finally, this can also support the climate change due to the correlation between the emission sources amount, health and climate. And that's it.
So in terms of helping people make more informed choices, how do we, I guess, encourage individuals to care about that health price on people outside of their homes when they're making like their own choices about what tools to use? Like, it's not like they're seeing someone in their own house get sick. So how can you make them care about others?
That's a great question. So empirically, there was a study from UCLA in 2015. It's a social experiment. They have two settings. One is using pricing as a mechanism to encourage users to save the energy. It turns out that's not very effective because the pricing is very minimal, like just $5 a year or something like that. Another group of this experiment was using non-pricing mechanism incentive. And they actually use this air pollution and health impact as a way to encourage people to save the energy at certain hours. So they showed that in general, up to 20% of the energy could be saved due to the non-pricing incentive. And this saving is more significant among people with young kids, with asthma family members. So I agree that not everybody will get on board to make this health informed decision more effectively. But I think there are quite a large group of people that are willing to help, especially given that we're not really compromising their real dollar cost that much. Just maybe $1 per year, and you're helping saving a lot on the other side, which I think is a great benefit. And I would do it not only for whole society, but also I do have some close family member who has asthma, so I think that's a great thing to do. Yeah.
So you've.
But by the way, that's why I'm here. So we need more HCI people to help us, to help people get on board on this.
How, if any, has this, knowing this information changed your own use of tools like LLMs and stuff in your daily workflow? And if so, if people wanted to limit their own impact on the environment and things, how could they change their own use of these tools?
I think that's, what we're providing here is just like a more informed decision, more informed cost benefit analysis. We tell you what is the environmental impact in carbon, water, and health. So that the benefit part, that depends on the individual cases. So if you're using LLM or generative AI for some science problem, then I think it's probably worth the cost. But if you're just doing some cartoon generating a cat, or even spreading misinformation, that's probably not the good usage case to justify the cost. So we're not trying to stop people from using this generative AI. But we need to look at the price tag when we buy, before we buy something. That's all we do. Like buying a car, we look at the price sticker, right? So the same thing here. Amazon is already showing cloud users the carbon footprint. Why not show the water consumption? And why not show the health impact? Right? The same thing.
I have two questions.
Sure.
First is a follow-up on that, which is a great point. But as a popular culture person, I feel like telling kids not to make cat memes with telling them not to do the coolest thing in the world, and they're gonna do it. And that I think that there's something about translating that to users in that sense, to say hey, this might feel really good, but it's actually poisoning us very deeply then.
Well, I guess if I understand your question correctly, for kids, they value this cat meme they put a higher utility or benefit for that usage, right? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I mean, like teenagers, but yeah, like it's the cool thing, you know, like.
Oh, yeah, then, so, I mean, as a researcher, at this stage, we're like providing some science-based cost metric. And of course, we can't really expect everyone to say, oh, we should follow one way of using AI or not use AI for other things. That's not possible. So, but here we're, as a researcher, we're just giving you this information to be more transparent. And then eventually that's the user's decision and how to make user more engaged and responding to these type of signals that are, I think that itself is a challenging and interesting topic.
I hear you, and I definitely don't think it's your responsibility to solve it. It's just I'm thinking about it a lot. Like I was playing with an iPhone last week, one of the new ones that does the Apple Intelligence, and like one of the apps that comes packaged now on every iPhone is like an emoji making app, where like you can say like make me look like a cow or something like that, and it'll use AI to change your face and make it look like a cow. And so it just seems like companies are asking consumers to use these things in these playful.
I think that comes into that requires more broader discussions. I do agree that the company want the user to use their service or whatever usage scenario they users are having. So that's why I think the legislators could come into play to have a role in the process to make sure at least these companies are not going too far to the extent of tangibly affecting others. So yeah, I think legislation could help, and that's why I'm really excited to work with them.
Thank you.
Hey, this was a great talk. Thank you for coming. I teach an article by an anthropologist at MIT who talks about the cost of AI and talks about the carbon a lot in the water, but also the noise.
Oh yeah.
So I just wonder if your approach to giving metrics to the health impacts and environmental impacts of AI can accommodate other kinds of costs other than the ones you mentioned today.
That's a great point. So yeah, this health, I've been hearing some complaints about people living next to the data center facilities about noise. Unfortunately, at this point, we are not looking at the noise for several reasons. First, once data center is operating, then it's just hard to get rid of the noise completely. So they can build higher walls to sort of isolate the noise a little bit better. And secondly, this noise, physically is just attenuating quickly with the distance, like maybe 2 miles away, it's going to be smaller. But that doesn't mean the local communities are not affected. They are affected by this noise constantly. So I think this solution might indirectly help. For example, if they turn off some of the servers that are not unnecessary for keeping on, then it could reduce the noise level a little bit. But we're not directly targeting the noise in our research yet. But I think that's a great aspect to consider as well.
Are there other costs then that are like on your mind other than the ones you talked about today, like for the future? I guess I feel suspicious that further costs will be discovered.
I think one of the potential costs, and actually legislators are already looking at, is the potential price increase for the utility bills. So because just simple economics through supply and demand, we are having this power infrastructure. We need to build more infrastructure to accommodate data centers, or even though we have the existing infrastructure, we have more loads. Like your freeway has more cars on the road, then there will be more congestion. So we're going to have more congestion along the transmission lines. We're going to have more infrastructure to support the data center growth. And whether that cost will be passed down to its customers or not, that's something that legislators are working to make sure that are not passed to the end customers. So I think that's one of the potential real financial damage to the people in the network.
Thank you.
And also retooling data centers, is there any cost associated with it? Because you mentioned something briefly on one of the early slides about that.
You mean turning up and down the servers?
No, coming up with new chips
Uh-huh.
and getting rid of old servers and so on. Is there any
Yes,
cost?
yeah, there are, this is basically the manufacturing and retirement of the chips and servers. Those have, actually, they have a pretty high energy consumption, environmental footprint, water consumption, carbon, and also health, not only for the air pollutant, but also they actually release toxic airs. If you look at the Intel report in Arizona, the Maricopa County is one of the non-attained area designated by EPA. That means the air quality in that area is just bad. And they're adding more semiconductor manufacturing plants due to the national security. That's what they call it, the national security reasons. So I think this manufacturing and retirement has the cost as well, and also e-waste. That's something which I think you mentioned.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for this talk. I think it really answered a lot of my questions, and I'm sure other people's as well. So I'm thinking about like how we can communicate this more, like that's what we were talking about, like how can you get people to care? So I'm wondering about like, can you contextualize what the impact is compared to other industries? Like you mentioned Bitcoin and like the meat industry and power plants and stuff. So if we're looking at all of these things combined, like carbon and water and pollutants, can we compare the impact, the health impacts of AI compared to these other industries?
So yes, so we did some, paper. So essentially in 2028, the U.S. data center will be exceeding twice as much as the health impact from coal-based steel-making industry in the U.S. And also exceeding the transportation in California on road emissions. So we didn't do a comprehensive comparison, but that's sort of the limited context that we can give. And actually with Bill, we did some research on the comparison between human labor versus the AI. And if you put aside the text quality, actually using AI could be more efficient than human labor. So, that's why we're not really stopping people from using AI. We just want to provide a more informed cost metric and try to reduce the impact of AI to make it even better. Yeah, so for more comparison, I think that's definitely something interesting to explore, but we didn't do much about that.
Just a question about your research process. It seems like most, if not all, of the data that you're leveraging in your new kind of mathematical modeling is existing and produced by scholars in other disciplines, or are
Yes.
you gathering your own? And if you had the ability to capture additional data to increase the accuracy of your predictions, like what would they be? Like what data do you need?
So first, for example, we look at the air dispersion modeling.
Mhm.
That has been studied for 100 years.
Mhm.
And the more complicated model, actually, we're not using the most complicated model. We're just using a simple, what is called reduced complexity model provided by the US EPA. So they are more advanced model. And to be honest, I don't really know the details, little knots and dots of the new models. So if there are like some atmospheric researchers or public health researchers, I think they can definitely give us a better view of the model. And that can help us to develop the AI model to approximate those process as well. So I'm planning to attend a conference called Climate and Public Health this year in Harvard.
Cool.
So that's hopefully I can get more knowledge and get more educated. Maybe get a master's degree in public health.
I love it.
Thank you. This is really interesting. One of the things that I'm now, this has prompted me to think about more is because we're thinking about sort of, okay, that trade-off of thinking about when is it useful to use AI, and I'm thinking about the amount of useless AI that is out there right now, that companies are throwing AI at everything, even if you can't do a Google search without using AI.
There's no opt-out option.
Yeah, sort of. We know people don't opt out. That's one of those UX things we know. And so the question about these things is, I mean, first of all, sort of, can we raise consciousness around some of that, sort of like getting companies to turn off the lights at night or to use sensors to do that, maybe figuring out ways of saying, maybe you don't need to run AI on every search. But the other thing is to also ask the question, what is that differential impact of a Google search versus a Google search with AI? Do we know that?
Well, there are some anecdotal data showing that using generative AI generally consume 10 times as much energy as a Google search. And that claim has been widely used as a ballpark estimate, or guesstimate if you call it, for gauging the energy consumption by AI versus regular Google search. And I personally would say probably 10 is not the precise number, but it should give us a reasonable order estimate. So I would personally buy that number as well. And in terms of how we can let the companies stop using, stop the AI development, I think they won't stop on that also. And well, I mean, AI is not necessarily a bad thing. So it's, I think it's just, we need to have more harmonious development. If you look at the new executive order by the current administration, which very soon expires, but the new executive order actually asks for renewable energy and water setting targets for minimizing water consumption for data centers, for new data centers. And yeah, those are some good messages sent out to those tech companies, but because we're going to have a new administration, so these things will change, will be fluid, and yeah. But we need to get a conversation going.
So there's a reception waiting for us. We'll take these last two questions, then we'll go out and have the reception.
I guess from a like HCI perspective, I guess from like the Amazon example, that seems like it's facing developers who are working on Amazon's platform versus like users who are using whatever app it is on Amazon platform and not Amazon itself, correct?
Yeah, that dashboard is for developers, for basically the cloud users, not for regular users for Amazon Shopping.
So then as like, if you're looking for the individual user, say child making cat photos, would it be something where it's like on the ChatGPT homepage of like, hey, this is what this query will cost?
That's
And sorry, and at that point, how much do you hit a barrier of like cognitive load for the user to like decide yes or no on that? Like the ChargePoint app for only used during like low energy time, like it's just a toggle, you hit it in settings and then you never think about it again. And then you get a little like discount on your like utilities bill, which is like, yay, I hit a toggle, I'm done. But like in these cases, you're asking people to think about it every time from a user perspective. So I guess, how do you get developers to be like, we're gonna care about this dashboard, even though our users use our stuff all the time? And then also, is there like researchers, like a future thing going on about how to make a UX that has users still using the product or being aware of this? Sorry, lost
so I think the dashboard idea has been something that a lot of researchers in the sustainable AI field been pushing for in the last few years. But of course, we're not seeing the tech companies are adopting those dashboard on their own. Probably we're not seeing that happening in the next few years by themselves. So, but if you look at other things, for example, Google Flights. Google Flights shows you the carbon emission you saved by taking this flight versus that flight. And they are, showing these things, carbon emission rate for other sectors, but they're just not showing this for themselves. So I think eventually,